All right, part four. You ready? Here we go. So this is part four of this little mini series, I suppose it's getting to be. Chapter 23 of Job. What should you do in life's darkest moments? And we just went through this little courtroom scene where Job is kind of picturing himself as this lawyer, and God is the judge. And that's noticed. I want you to notice something. He's not wanting to be delivered from the presence of his buddies that are giving him a hard time. He doesn't even want he's not even asking for, notice he's not asking for health or um, for his health to be restored. He's not asking for any of that. He's asking to be delivered from his judge. I mean, he's making sure that if, as long as I'm right with God, remember back in Job 1, in Job 1:21, he says, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." That's I can worship the Lord whether whether he gives or he takes away. Paul says the same thing in the New Testament. He says, "I've learned to be content in whatever state that I am." You know, that wasn't a new concept. It's all the way back in Job. I mean, this is before Moses. This is before Abraham. I mean, this is this is amazing. I mean, see, God doesn't change, and the character of the people who are godly don't change. The the communications method changes, and our clothes look different, but inside, people have always been people. And here's where we go. And so we start with verse 8 this time. And he says, "Look, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. When he works on the left hand, I cannot behold him, and when he turns to the right hand, I cannot see him." Chapter 23, verse 8 and 9. That's very poetic. I mean, being an English teacher, a literature teacher, that is almost Shakespearean. I look up and I look down and I look left and right and around, and I can't behold or see or what. It's this. I mean, it's very dramatic, and so Job is really trying to emphasize by his use of repetition and his use of. I mean, he was being emphatic with these guys. Remember, he was pretty exasperated with them, and it's kind of like. I mean, quite frankly, I mean, I don't know until I get to heaven and I talk to him, but I have a feeling that I suspect that it could have very well been that Job in his mind and heart was thinking, "Boy, I'm going through all this stuff, and now I got to teach you guys how to think about God too." I mean, you're supposed to be my friend. You're supposed to know all this stuff already. He thought they were peers, and it turns out they weren't right-thinking peers. And that happens sometimes. Sometimes friends betray you. The people that are supposed to be your friends betray you. And sometimes they mean to do it, and sometimes they don't. But either way, um, you can give that to the Lord too. It says back in Genesis 50:20, Joseph told his brothers who had completely betrayed him and should not have, and very much sinned in doing it. He said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." And so you can trust the Lord even when you can't trust people, and they're mistreating you, and that's a big blessing too. It's been a big blessing in my life, and it can be in yours if it hasn't been already. But so go down to verse 10. So, in this sense that, I mean, he admits poetically, dramatically, emphatically, I have no clue what God is up to. I can't, where is God in this? See, now, scope that out to this situation, to, boy, much worse situations like the Holocaust. I used to teach a book called Night by a fellow named Elie Wiesel, he was in his teens, maybe younger than that, if I remember, um, and in the concentration camps. And a good part of that novel that's expressing is, I mean, it's probably 100, it's probably less than 150 pages, but it's powerful. And I mean, it'd take you an evening to read, but you wouldn't sleep well. And he part of the big theme is, where is God in all of this? You know, and it's right here in Job 23. See, it doesn't matter how we're suffering. I mean, the goal is not our suffering. The goal is our godliness and our holiness, and that doesn't make God insensitive. As a matter of fact, He wants the best for us long term, so He's willing to make sure that we go through what we need to here in order to be close to Him forever. See, I love you enough to give you, it's like my own son. I love you enough to make sure you have what you need and not always what you want. And so in verse 10, and verse 10 is one of the, boy, that's a, you pound that nail in the wall and you leave it there and you hang your hat on it. And it's one of the most important verses in the Bible to remember, I think. I mean, it's my opinion, but it's so important. People talk about having life verses. You ought to have 31,000 life verses, but this is a key one, and it says, "But he knows the way that I take." Even though I have no clue what he's doing, and none of you do either, that's the implication. But God knows the way that I take. And when he's finished testing me, when he has tested me, when he has finished testing me, I shall come forth as gold. That's exciting every time I read it. But he knows the way that I take. There's some deep theology here. There's some deep truth here about God. He knows the way that I take. See, nothing that's happening is a surprise to God. God has never, we've experienced things that God has never experienced. You can't throw God a surprise birthday party. Number one, he doesn't have a birthday and he can never be surprised. God has never learned anything. Now, Jesus has as a human being, but God in his deity, he's always known everything. Everything. He's never learned anything. When I was teaching, there were teachers, and I love them. I mean, I get what they were saying, but I used to just kind of smile and nod and have conversations when the Lord allowed. But what's your goal for your students? And without thinking, it had been pounded into us in college and maybe through the culture. We want to make sure that our students are lifelong learners, lifelong learners, lifelong learners. I mean, you'd wake a teacher up out of the 2:00 dead sleep. What's the goal for your students? Lifelong learners. I mean, it was that ingrained in us. That's not the goal. The goal is to create the atmosphere where they hunger for the truth and they have the skills to discern between truth and falsehood, because that is what's most important. You can learn all your life, but you can learn the wrong things all your life. A friend of mine describes it as you can climb the ladder all your life. You can, if each rung is something you learn, you can climb the ladder all your life. But if you get to the top and find out that it's leaning against the wrong building, you're in a lot of trouble, because there's not time to go back down. You've wasted your life. There's a whole book by a guy named John Piper. It's up in Minnesota. It's wonderful. It's Don't Waste Your Life. Go read that book. If you're ordering something on Amazon, that along the way, I'm sure I'll mention books like that, and I don't mean to. It's just what I'm sharing here. But I don't have that planned out. But that's a great one. Don't waste your life. If you go to the little featured thing on the YouTube channel, the DTBM, Discover the Book, there's a series in there somewhere that talks about, and if it's not, it's on his website, discoverthebook.org. You go to the website, and there's a whole sermon series about Bible talk series, about how not to waste your life, and it's back and forth with David and Saul, King Saul and David. And Saul completely wasted his life, but David didn't. And even though he made mistakes, and so here we go. Let's finish this up. We don't want to go into part 5, I don't think. But he knows the way that I take. God is completely in control. He's not surprised by any of this. And when he's tested me, see, now that's fascinating. Job knew that what he was going through was a test. I don't know if the Lord had revealed that to him, or if that's something Noah and his family had taught him, or the descendants in between. But he knew that he was being tested. He knew that he wasn't out of God's reach. He knew that it was an opportunity. You know what a test is? It's an opportunity to show that you've learned something. Right? So whatever hardship you're going through, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. It's an opportunity for you to respond in a way that pleases God and prove to him that you've learned I don't have to let whatever's going on derail me completely. I can still, Colossians 3, 1 and 2, focus my eyes on you. I can still, 2 Corinthians 5, 9, I can make it my aim to please the Lord. I can make it my aim in life to please you. You know, you can shoot on accident. That's a military term. I mean, Paul was thinking about, I'm sure, spears, and I mean that was before crossbows and things. That was bows and arrows and spears, maybe catapults. I don't know, but the Roman. But do you know that is, you can shoot somebody on accident. A lot of people have been shot on accident, but nobody aims on accident. It's a very slow, deliberate choice, intentional. And so you have to, in this time, aim to please the Lord like Job was here. And he knew that he will come forth as gold. Wow. Well, look at the end of this. What's his response? What's the upright response? The blameless response to the worst kind of suffering that comes? Know that God is who he says he is, that he knows the way where he hasn't forgotten you. He knows the way that I take. He sees you. You're not forgotten. You're not abandoned. You're not alone. And when he's tested me, when the test is finished, I'm going to pass this opportunity. This is going to come forth. This is going to be okay. And I may die. It's not going to be okay in that sense. It may not be. I mean, if this doesn't get you, something else will. Car accident, cancer, something's going to get you sooner or later. There's no way off the planet except the rapture or in a box. I don't mean to be insensitive. It's just true. Let's talk about it. You know, Job was facing, he didn't know how, the book of Job hadn't been written. He didn't know how it was going to turn out. But look at how it ends for now. I mean, this is not the end. This is the middle, but the end of, our little series here. My foot has held fast to his steps, and I have kept his way and not turned aside. I have not departed from the commandment of his lips. See, I'm still following Jesus. I'm still following God. I'm still obeying him because I love him. Jesus said in John 14:15, if you love me, obey me. And he was. This is the way he said, I'm loving God. You're accusing me of turning away from God, and I'm not loving God. I'm not loving God. I'm following him. I love him. I'm fine. Here's the proof. I have not departed from the commandment of his lips. And this is something that's really convicting. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. I've treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. Well, number one, Moses wasn't even, I mean, this is a long time before Moses. Do you know, I mean, think about what's going on here. He didn't have the Bible. None of this is the oldest account in the Bible. The first thing that would have happened. I mean, Moses wrote down creation and all of that back, but he was telling people way that lived after Job, here's what's happened. And so this is really the oldest book in the Bible. So he didn't have any of that. What words of God's mouth did he have? Well, he would have known exactly what Noah's sons and grandsons told him. He would have known from his godly heritage and his family and the generations before him that not all the way, not too far back to Noah, that would have told him, see, here's what God has said to us. Here's what God said to Noah and Ham and Shem and Japheth. Here's what we know God said. See, he's treasured that knowledge more than his necessary food. I mean, how many of you forget to eat? Especially now that you're cooped up in your house, probably eating more than normal. I mean, how many of you forget to eat? You don't, because you treasure your body and you get hungry or whatever, or your emotional comfort and you're trying to eat for that. He's treasured this more than his necessary food. And then verses 13 and 14, he loves me, so he's appointed this for me, and many such things are with him. You know what many such things are? He's done it for you too. He's appointed what you're going through for you because he loves you. Okay.